Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us this afternoon. So this is the East End Regional Training Session for Alewife Monitoring, which is hosted by the Peconic Estuary Partnership. My name is Lauren Shear, and I am the Education and Outreach Coordinator for the Peconic Estuary Partnership, which is also known as PEP. We refer to ourselves as PEP. And I also have my colleagues on the webinar today, Elizabeth Horenstein, who is PEP's State Coordinator, and Sarah Schaefer, who is PEP's Program Coordinator. So we'll be providing the training for you today. And I'd also like to make a shout out to our partners. We have Pete Topping on the call of Peconic Baykeeper. He collaborates with us to monitor Alewife Creek, which is a major alewife spawning run in our watershed. And I'm not sure if he's on the call yet, but we will also have Byron Young on the call. He was a fisheries biologist with New York State DEC and has been very instrumental in this alewife monitoring effort. So we definitely have a great group of people here today that can answer any questions as we go through the training. And so the goal of this training is to help teach you how to identify river herring, and one in particular is the fish alewife. So after this training, you'll learn, you'll know what to look for, what locations around the East End are spots in need of monitoring. And of course, you'll know how to record your sightings in the CTUC's Long Island River Herring online survey. So you'll know what to look for and how to record your data. So that's everything we're going to be going over today. And I would like to make a note that I am recording this meeting so we can share this meeting and all of our helpful resources to you through our email listservs and social media outlets. That will help you along in this monitoring season. But also keep an eye on the chat box because I will be dropping in links to resources periodically throughout the training. And speaking of which, for the chat box, you are welcome to use that chat box, which is in your Zoom toolbar, to ask questions at any time during the meeting. So PEP and our partners will be able to answer your questions in that chat box, but you can also have us highlight it and interrupt our speaker to address the question. But also keep in mind that there's going to be a point during the presentation that we're going to break for questions, and you can more formally ask a question by unmuting yourself at that time. But while our speaker is speaking, we just ask that you have your microphones on mute just to minimize distractions. So that's kind of the housekeeping stuff. So we're recording the meeting. You can use the chat box. And I actually would like to just give you a brief overview before we get started on who are we? So who is PEP? So the Peconic Estuary Partnership is one of 20 national estuary programs that is funded by the EPA through the Clean Water Act. That's because the Peconic Bays, the network of bays on the East End, is identified as an estuary of national significance. We have a very great, invaluable resource here on the East End. So it's recognized by the EPA as such. And so our program was formed with that mission to protect and restore this invaluable resource. And it's a partnership effort. So we work with our partners on water quality projects, habitat and wildlife projects, and climate change projects to achieve that mission. And one of the things that we do amongst all of these things is this alewife monitoring program. So as volunteers, you contribute data that provides information for us to fuel projects that help restore critical habitat for this alewife, these fish. So we really thank you all for being here and helping us in that endeavor. And then I have one last announcement before we get into the training. We are going to be hosting a virtual conference. The dates are April 14th, 15th, and 16th, where we're going to really dive into these sessions. They're going to run from 2 to 4 on each one of those days, about the challenges that our estuary faces. And it's not going to be a typical conference where we're going to be just showing presentations, but we're actually going to have our partners go into discussion about what can we do about these problems with water quality, climate change, and habitats and wildlife, and the challenges that we face And the goal of this conference is to leave with a fruitful conversation that puts into next steps and puts into action what we need to do about these challenges. So it's going to be an interactive conference. You'll be able to ask questions with these experts, and we really encourage you to join us at that time. So with that, let's get started. I'm going to introduce Elizabeth Hornstein, who is PEP State Coordinator. She's going to be providing us with the Alewife monitoring training today. I'm going to stop sharing my screen so that Elizabeth can take over.
Today we will be going over how to join a Zoom meeting.
All right, can you guys see my screen? My screen's good, right, Lauren? You can see the full screen?
Yes.
Okay, great. All right, well, I want to thank everyone again for joining us to learn about the Long Island Volunteer River Herring and Eel Survey. This survey is a Long Island-wide effort that is a partnership led by Peconic Estuary Partnership, Seatuck Environmental Association, and the Long Island Sound Study. And with assistance from Peconic Baykeeper and the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation. So I'm just going to give you an overview of what you can expect from this training. I'm going to start out by giving you a little bit of background or biology on river herring and eels. Then I'm going to talk a little bit about some of our efforts to restore critical fish habitat for these species. And then I'll dive into the actual volunteer monitoring program and talk about how you can help us monitor for these species. And finally, at the end, I'll actually highlight several sites that we've identified on the eastern end of Long Island that are good sites for trying to monitor these species, easy access spots that we think maybe there would be fish there. So river herring and eel are diadromous fish. The term diadromous means through running. So these are fish that migrate between fresh and saltwater. And there are two types of diadromous fish, anadromous fish and catadromous fish. And we're going to start out by talking about anadromous fish. Anadromous means uprunning. These are fish that spend the majority of their lives out at sea, but migrate to fresh waters to breed. And some examples of anadromous fish are the Atlantic sturgeon, striped bass, American shad, and then the river herring. River herring is actually a collective term for two species of fish that look very similar, the alewife and the blueback herring. It can be very hard to tell the difference between these two species, but they do have some slight differences. The alewife tends to have a larger eye and a more compressed body compared to the blueback herring. And in the Northeast and on Long Island, alewife tends to be more abundant than the blueback herring. And this is particularly true on the eastern end of Long Island. We believe that the majority of fish that are entering our coastal waters and our freshwater streams are alewife. So I'm going to primarily focus on alewife. Alewife are found from the Carolinas to Maine and up to Newfoundland. This is a fairly small fish, only growing to about a foot in length, and it has a maximum lifespan of about 8 to 10 years. As I mentioned before, these fish spend the majority of their lives out in the ocean, but in late winter, early spring, they will migrate to our coastal waters and eventually make their way up into freshwater rivers and streams to spawn. And the timing of this migration is largely dependent on water temperature, we believe. When water temperatures reach an ideal temperature of about 48 degrees, we tend to see them start entering our freshwater rivers and streams. So on Long Island, we typically see these fish entering our streams from late February or early March through mid-May. Following spawning, the adults will generally head back downstream and back out to the ocean, but the juvenile alewife will remain in freshwaters for the first several months of their life, feeding and growing. As they start to get a little bit bigger, they'll head back to the estuary waters, and then by the time they reach age 1, they will have made it back to the ocean and will have joined large herring schools as shown in the photo on the right. And they'll live in the ocean waters for the next 3 to 5 years until they reach sexual maturity. At that point, they will make their first spawning migration run back to or near the same stream that they were originally born in, which is pretty neat and creates a lot of various individual alewife populations along the Atlantic coast. These fish play a very important ecological role in our coastal ecosystems. They're an important food source for a number of larger fish species like striped bass and bluefish, for migratory birds like osprey and heron, as well as mammals, including whales when they're out in the ocean, and then otters when they're in our rivers. And the many predators of alewife in turn support commercial and recreational fisheries, the seafood industry, ecotourism industry. So having abundant alewife populations is not only important for sustaining healthy coastal ecosystems with diverse wildlife, but it's also important for sustaining a vibrant marine economy. The second species of our survey that we're asking you guys to monitor for is the American eel. This fish is a catadromous fish. The word catadromous means down running, and these fish have the opposite life cycle to anadromous fish. So these are fish that spend most of their lives in freshwater and then migrate out to the ocean to spawn. And American eels have a really interesting life cycle. All American eels spawn in the middle of the North Atlantic Ocean in the Sargasso Sea. So this is where their life begins. Once the eggs hatch, the larvae are carried by ocean currents to the Atlantic coast, all up and down the Atlantic coast of North America. And these larvae will eventually make their way into fresh waters. Now, eel get called different names depending on what stage they are in their life cycle. So as the larvae approach the coast, they turn into these translucent thin glass eels, as shown in the top left photo here. And then they will eventually develop some pigmentation, at which point they're called elvers. And it's at this stage that they are migrating further and further into freshwater habitats. And they will remain in fresh waters for the majority of their life as immature yellow eels. And then after about 20 to 30 years, they reach sexual maturity, and at this point are called silver eels, and at this point will make their way back out to the Sargasso Sea, where they will spawn and subsequently die. So they only spawn once. Unfortunately, both river herring and American eel have suffered some pretty large population declines compared to historic levels. So the graph here on the right, the blue line is river herring landings. You can see that in the commercial landings, you can see that in the early to mid 1900s, sorry, these guys supported some pretty large commercial fisheries. But in recent years, there's been very low catches of these species because there aren't that many fish around anymore to catch. And then this next graph is a graph of American eel abundance over time. And American eel abundance has stabilized a bit in recent years, but it is low relative to historic levels. And the reason for the decline of these species is in part due to overfishing, but also in part due to loss of their critical freshwater habitat due to the construction of dams. In the late 1800s and early 1900s, dams were built on nearly all of Long Island's tributaries and on nearly all of the tributaries up and down the Atlantic coast. And these dams cut off historic migratory routes for diadromous fish like river herring and American eel, blocking access to hundreds of acres of their freshwater habitat. So this resulted in some pretty significant population declines for these species. And today on Long Island, we really only have, compared to historic levels, small remnant spawning or migration runs of these species, which is why the survey that you guys are going to learn about today is really important, because it helps us learn where on Long Island these small remnant populations remain. And now there are a lot of efforts underway to restore these species. There's a number of environmental organizations and regulatory agencies across Long Island that have come together to form what's called the Long Island Diadromous Fish Work Group. And this group is working really hard to restore access to critical freshwater habitat for these species. And there's a couple ways that we can restore access to this habitat. One is we can actually remove the dams or barriers that are blocking access to upstream freshwater habitat. This sometimes has its challenges though, because these dams have impounded water behind them and often created lakes that are now used for a number of recreational purposes. So, folks aren't always keen necessarily to just remove these dams. So if dam removal isn't possible, the next best option is to install fish passes or fish ladders that allow the fish to go through, over, or around these dams. And in the photos here, you see examples of several fish passes that have been installed on tributaries around Long Island. And to date, we have actually completed about 14 fish passage projects on Long Island. So we are making really great progress at restoring freshwater habitat for these species. And I just want to touch a little bit on the specific restoration that Peconic Estuary Partnership has been involved in. In the Peconic Estuary, we actually have the two largest spawning runs on Long Island. The largest spawning run is at Alewife Creek in Southampton. And this happens to be one of the only tributaries on Long Island where there aren't any major barriers to up and downstream migration for diadromous fish. The second largest run is in the Peconic River, which flows into the western part of the estuary. Unlike Alewife Creek, though, unfortunately, there are several barriers on the Peconic River that are preventing blocking access for diadromous fish. And then I just want to note that the other smaller yellow stars on the map are other places in the Peconic Estuary where smaller alewife spawning runs have been observed or documented. So as I mentioned, the Peconic River hosts a pretty large alewife spawning run, but there's a number of barriers on this river that prevent the up and downstream migration for fish like alewife and American eel. So Peconic Estuary Partnership has been working with our partners to try to restore access to critical freshwater habitat on this river. Previously, there were 6 dams along the length of this river, but in 2010, a nature-like fishway was installed at the first barrier at Grangeable Park in downtown Riverhead. And this is called a nature-like fishway because you can see from the photo that this fishway kind of mimics the natural environment as opposed to more structural fishways that you saw in the previous photos. And this fishway has been really successful. It passes tens of thousands of alewife each year, as well as American eels, providing them with access to the lower reaches of the Peconic River system. In 2016, another fish pass was installed at the Edwards Avenue Dam, further upstream on the Peconic River. Here, an Alaskan steep pass fish ladder was installed, as well as a separate American eel passage to also help the American eels get over this dam. Now, unfortunately, fish can't yet access these fishways because there are a couple of remaining downstream barriers on the river still, but we are working with our partners to get fish passes installed at these remaining downstream barriers, which we hope will be completed over the next few years. We are also working on installing a fish passage at the Woodhull Dam on the Little River, which is a major tributary to the Peconic River. And we're actually hoping that this fish passage gets installed this fall, which is very exciting. And this is going to be really great because currently the majority of fish that use the Grangeable Fishway actually head down Little River and seem to end up spawning in the pool below Woodhull Dam. And I have just a little video here to show you what these fish look like congregating in the pool below the dam. So once the fish ladder gets installed at Woodhull, all of these fish will have access to about 90 acres of additional habitat within preserved Suffolk County park lands. And once we complete all of the fish passage projects that are in progress currently on the Peconic River, we will have restored over 300 acres of habitat for diadromous fish in this river system, and they'll be able to access the majority of the river at that point. So the volunteer survey is really important part of our restoration efforts because, as I said before, it helps us identify where on Long Island these fish are and where restoration might be needed. And then it also helps us to evaluate the success of our current restoration efforts. So how the survey works is we ask volunteers to go out to their local streams and tributaries and look for migrating alewife and eels during the spring season. So the survey runs from March 1st through the end of May. And the goal here is to document where alewife and eel are making these spawning or migration runs, when they're making these runs, and then when possible to estimate the size of these existing runs. And again, we're looking to find places where these fish have maybe not previously been documented before to get a better, fuller understanding of where they are across the island. And then for streams where we are installing fish passes, we are hoping to observe these fish upstream of those fish passes, providing evidence that those fish passes have been successful. So through the effort led by PEP, CTUC, and Long Island Sound Study, we typically train about 50 to 100 citizen scientists a year across Long Island. And we're able to cover around 50 tributaries across the island through this survey, which is really great. And to date, we have identified over 20 remnant alewife spawning runs through this survey. And as I mentioned before, we've completed about 14 fish passage projects to date, many of which have been completed thanks to the data that we have gotten through this survey. So where should you survey? On a lot of these tributaries, there are still barriers that are preventing these fish from fully migrating upstream. So you're going to want to survey just downstream of the first impassable barrier on that tributary. And the best places to look are places where the flow is somewhat constricted, where the water is clear and it's relatively shallow. So where it's easy to see. And we have identified a number of spots on the eastern end of Long Island where there's easy monitoring access and that we think contains potential alewife and American eel habitat. So in a few minutes, I'm going to pull up a map and highlight some of those places for you. When should you survey? So obviously the more you can get out there and survey, the better. And if you can survey at fairly regular intervals, that's helpful. But if you're only able to survey, sporadically or a couple times throughout the season, that's also useful information. So just survey whenever you can. Whenever you can devote about 15 minutes to monitoring at your site, that's enough time to go out there and look for these fish. And keep in mind that, it's going to be easiest to see the fish when visibility conditions are good, when there's light and clear water. but you may want to check out your site under varying weather conditions and at various times of the day, because that does provide some valuable information to us on, exactly when these fish tend to migrate into our rivers and streams and when they don't. So what do you do when you're out at your site? You're going to want to find a place where it's easy for you to see in the water, and you're going to want to try to minimize glare. And if you have polarized sunglasses, those make it really easy to see in the water. So keep that in mind. These fish are going to be easiest to see against a light background. And keep in mind that they are adapted to be a bit cryptic from above or blend in with their surrounding. So you've got to be patient and attentive. And again, you're going to want to observe the area for about 15 minutes, looking for any signs of moving or schooling fish in the water or fish trying to cross up the barrier. And I have a couple of videos just to give you some examples here. So this is a video of alewife at Sunken Meadow on the North Shore of Long Island. And this is kind of ideal viewing conditions. You've got shallow, clear water and a nice light background. So it's really easy to see these fish here. And then I have another video to show you American eel. So here's the eel. They're trying to find their way. Some of them are running into this wall here, which you'll often see them kind of running their noses into the barrier. And keep in mind that there are other fish that you may observe when you're out there. So before you head out, try to get a good idea of what you're looking for. Eels are pretty easy because they're pretty distinct, but you may get alewife confused with some other species. It's possible that you might see brook trout when you're out surveying. These guys have kind of an olive green color, and when you're looking from above, they kind of have these like wavy markings that you may see. Another fish you might encounter is carp, but these guys are much larger than the alewife. They've got barbels and they've got this long fin that runs along the length of their back. It's also possible that you could encounter Atlantic menhaden or bunker, although these fish are typically not found in fresh waters. They sometimes can get pushed into the lower reaches of tributaries by their predators. These guys, though, have more rounded body shape than alewife and larger heads, and they've got this kind of yellowish tint. And you'll often see them in larger schools and circling patterns like you kind of see here in this photo. And then another thing to keep in mind is that in addition to just looking for signs of fish in the water, there's a few other things you can keep an eye out for. Sometimes you will find alewife scales on the banks of the tributary. So a picture of those scales is shown on the left. If you do find scales, but you're not sure if they're alewife scales, you can snap a photo and you can send it to us and we can confirm if they are alewife scales. You can also look out for alewife's predators like osprey and herons. If you see these guys out there, that could be a sign that there are fish nearby. So what should you record and where to record it? Well, CTUC Environmental Association has developed an online data form through the Survey 123 app, which I'm going to pull up here in a second to show you how that works. But there's a couple ways you can access this data form. There's a link here listed that you can access. And then there's also, you can use the QR code. If you've got a smartphone, you can actually use your phone and snap a picture of the QR code with your camera, and that should pull up the survey as well. And I'm just gonna switch over here to show you this survey. And okay. Hopefully this is, so when you pull up that link, you should get this pop-up where you have the option to open the data form either in your browser or in the Survey 123 field app. Now, if you want to open it in the app, you need to have previously downloaded the Survey 123 app on your smartphone. But if you have the app downloaded, you'll be able to open the survey in your app. And the great thing about the app is that once you open the survey in your app, it will then be saved in your app the next time. So the next time you want to access the survey, you can just go to your Survey 123 app. The river herring and eel survey should be right there, and you can click on it and easily pull up the data form. The other option is to open the survey in the browser, which is what I'm going to do at the moment since I'm on the computer, so I can show you what this data sheet looks like. So on this data sheet, you can fill out your name, enter your email. You're going to enter the river or stream that you're monitoring at. There's a drop down so you can pick out your location, but if you can't find it, there is another option where you can type in the stream that you're monitoring at. It's also good if you can pinpoint your location, and there's a couple ways to do this, and there are some tips provided here. If you have location services enabled, you can click the Find My Location icon and it will find your location. If that doesn't work, you can actually, drag this point to the location that you actually are on the map, the little blue arrow here, to make sure that that matches up with where you actually are. And then you are going to enter the date that you're surveying, the time. If you know it, you can enter the tidal stage information. If you have a thermometer and it's safe and easy to stick the thermometer in the tributary, you can take the water temperature and then enter that information. You can enter, the cloud coverage information, so we have an idea of what the conditions were when you were out surveying. And then most importantly, you're going to tell us whether you saw any river herring present, yes or no. And if you saw any, you would enter approximately how many you saw. Now, this doesn't have to, don't worry about this being an exact number. If you see one, enter one. If you think there's 5, 10, if you think there's a lot, maybe it's 50 or something like that. But just a general estimate of how many you think might be out there. And then same thing for American eels. Did you see eels? Yes or no? Approximately how many do you think you saw? There's also a place to enter in any other species that you may have seen while you're out there, as well as a place to upload photos. So if you see a fish, but you're not entirely sure if it's an alewife or eel, you can snap a photo and upload that image here, and then we can confirm the fish species. There's also a notes section to enter in any other information that you'd like to tell us while you're out surveying. So I want to, I think, stop here for just a minute to see if there's any questions about how to do the surveying, how to use the data form. And then after I answer those questions, I'm going to pull up a tributary map of Long Island and highlight some places where you guys could actually go out and look for these fish. So you'll have several options to choose from.
Elizabeth, Paul Hagan with a quick question. Thanks for this. It's terrific to hear about your work again and to get some direction. In terms of loading up the information for those of us who aren't going to use a phone, is this something where you need it as we go, or can we kind of collect data for a few weeks and then find a Saturday morning and populate what we've collected? What's your preference?
Yeah, so right, if you don't want to use the online data form when you're out at your site, that's completely fine. If you want to record all this data, on a paper data sheet and then enter it at a later time, that's fine. The benefit of entering it, through this system sooner rather than later is it lets us know that fish have been spotted. So if you see fish, it lets us know you are seeing fish out at this site, so we can kind of keep track of that throughout the season. But I would say most importantly, just make sure we get your data at some point. And yeah, does that help, Paul?
It does, and I will share my enthusiasm for the fish as I see them. Thanks.
Okay, great. Yeah, yeah. Thank you. And I also just want to mention, I see Byron on here. So Byron, we did introduce you earlier, just so you know.
I can't tell time. I thought it was 4:30, not 4.
That's okay. That's okay.
To address Paul's question a little bit further, I'm like him. I enter the data on my desktop computer when I get home. It might be a day or two, but what I do, I carry a notebook with me that I record the information in the notebook so it's recorded rather than trying to remember it. So if you've got a little notebook, carry that with you and keep your notes, and when you get a chance, enter it into the system.
Yeah, that's good, Byron. And I do want to mention, I think I can switch over here. Lauren can put the link to this in the chat, but we have developed a monitoring protocol for you guys that kind of just highlights all of the information that I just went over, plus a little extra information, like what to bring to your site, and again, what to do at your site. And then there's a list of the information to record. So if you're not using the online data sheet, maybe just, carry a copy of this protocol with you. And like Byron said, have a little notebook to record that data.
Comment, I noticed you put down a clicker to keep track of the fish you count.
Optional.
Yeah, I know it's optional. I think, it's, yes, very optional because it gets confusing. When I'm encountering large schools of fish, I will usually try to count a small section of it, and then how does that fit into the rest of the school, and do a multiplication.
Yeah, that makes sense, Byron.
Yeah.
I think that.
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
I was just going to say, I think the clicker was more, actually, I think this was Pete's suggestion. So Pete can chime in here. But
Well, yes.
I think it's more for, at Alewife Creek, I think it's helpful when he's looking at the fish crossing through the culvert there, which we'll talk about in a second,
That's true. I
to
didn't
keep
think
track
about
of the fish.
Yep.
So I think it depends where you're monitoring at.
Yeah, I didn't think about Pete and Alewife Creek. That would work here, yes.
Oh, Byron.
I'm sorry, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I had mentioned that, I think, when Elizabeth had first passed this around, because in that particular area, there is a bottleneck, and it's and you can actually count fish by fish. And if you're counting for 15 minutes, there might be 20, 25. And I find it exciting. I get a little distracted, so I use the clicker.
Yes, no, that's true. That would work there very well there.
Yep.
And the number of fish that you see, an estimate rounded off to the nearest 50 or 100 or 10 is perfectly suitable. It's as we have worked with the Peconic, my estimates in the pool below Woodhull Dam have been crude at best. We're now modifying them with the camera, and that's the best way to get an accurate count, an exact count. So, we're not going to hold you to the numbers you put down. If you put down 1 million, we might question you, but if it's 100 or 200, those are exciting numbers.
Yeah.
Even 1 is an exciting number in some of these places. So don't be too concerned about the exact count.
Yeah, good advice. Thanks, Byron, and thanks, Pete. So, and since I brought up the map here, let me just highlight a few, and we started talking about monitoring spots. Let me highlight a few monitoring spots for you guys. Of course, like we just learned, there may be other spots that you're aware of that you may want to check out. But if let me highlight some spots to give you some ideas. So this map is actually available on the CTUC website, and is a really great map because it's for the whole island. The little fish icons indicate places where we have documented river herring to date. You can also see locations of all the dams. The green areas, if you zoom in, indicate places where we believe these fish should have access. The blue indicates restored areas, and the red indicates places that they don't have access. So one thing to keep in mind when you're monitoring is if there's red and they don't have access there, you're going to want to monitor just downstream if you can of that blockage, as I mentioned in the presentation. So I'm going to highlight some of the eastern end sites, and then if there's anyone else who's maybe not from the east end and you want to ask us about other sites, we can do that at the end and get back to further questions at the end too. So this is the Peconic River here. The Peconic Estuary Partnership, along with Byron here, we monitor on the Peconic River pretty extensively at Grangeable Park and at Woodhull. The only spot where, you know, maybe volunteers could help us would be at the Upper Mills Dam, which is here off of, I think it's Middle Country Road here. And there is a DEC kayak and launch site here. So there's a parking lot that you can park in. The tricky spot with this site is that in addition to there being a dam here, there's also a USGS weir engaging station just downstream of the dam that is also creating a barrier for these fish. So you're going to be most likely to see fish just downstream of that weir or trying to get over that weir. But, you know, if you're in this area, that is a potential site you can monitor. And if you are in this area, you know, and you haven't been out to Woodhull Dam yet to see the large amounts of alewife that congregate below that dam, like I showed you in that video, I do encourage you to get out there and check that out because it is a pretty cool site to see. Another spot I want to highlight is Hubbard County Park, Mill Creek. Suffolk County Parks, this is Suffolk County Parkland. Suffolk County Parks actually installed a fish passage here in 2019, and we are hoping to get some additional eyes on this site to see if there are fish that are using this fish ladder or trying to use this fish ladder. It's a little bit hard to tell from the map, but there is a road. Yeah, it's like right here, there's a road and there you can park here and then you can walk along the trail to get to the fish passage site within Hubbard County Park. And the next spot I want to highlight is Alewife Creek. So this spot, monitoring is being led really by Pete from Peconic Baykeeper. So I'll let him jump in if he wants to say anything. But if you want to monitor at this site, I do encourage you to reach out to Pete and let him know so he can give you any further information about this site. I know he's asking people to monitor at the North Sea Road culvert because this is an easy spot to access and actually see the fish at. So Pete, I don't know if there's anything else you want to say about this one.
Yeah, I'll chime in for a minute. Yeah, so I live local to the area, so it's a spot I keep an eye on pretty much daily throughout the spring. And for the last, I guess this will be the third year, we've been trying to get extra eyes on there. So all the information that I gets funneled through to the overall survey. But just so I have access to the intensive site data, I have a separate mailing list, and I'll email volunteers when I start seeing fish or if there are gaps of time that could be better covered. So I'll type my email into the chat. Also happy to go explore any other places in the area with anybody that's interested. So I'll type my email in the chat, and if anyone wants to get in touch, please do.
Thank you, Pete. Okay, another spot I want to highlight is Lignie Brook. This is in Sag Harbor. When there's enough flow in this creek, the fish can get all the way up this brook into Long Pond here. But when there's not enough flow, then that creates a bit of a barrier. There are a couple places you can monitor here let's see if I can, at the Brook Kiln Road and the north, it might be easier to see if I switch back. Sorry. I'm gonna switch back to this view so you guys can see the roads. But I zoomed out. All right, so back to Lignie. So there's a couple places to monitor on this creek. You can monitor at the culvert on Brick Kiln Road or at the Bridgehampton Turnpike crossing.
The other thing to do is is to walk in from that park and walk the stream if you don't see anything in the roads. If the mashup,
This one right here, right?
Yeah. There's a trail that leads down to the stream. And you can at times, if there's running water, you'll find the fish in the stream leading up into the lake.
Okay, thanks, Byron. And then the other spot I want to highlight is Alewife Brook. There's a crossing here on Alewife Brook Road that leads to Skoy Pond. This is in East Hampton if you live out that way. East Hampton did upgrade the culvert here at Alewife Brook Road recently, and we're looking to see if fish are able to use this upgraded culvert or if they're trying to use this upgraded culvert. So that's a spot to keep an eye on if you are out that way. And then if you're all the way on the east end in Montauk, we're also looking to get some eyes out here at a couple spots where we're looking to do some restoration work, both north of Lake Montauk and south of Lake Montauk. So a couple spots to look for on the north side are at the crossing on East Lake Drive that leads into Little Reed Pond. And then if you walk back into the park here, this is Suffolk County Parkland, there's another culvert that leads into Big Reed Pond that you can check for fish at. And then on the south side, there's a culvert at Old Westlake Drive that leads from Lake Montauk into Stepping Stones Pond. And we have had sightings of alewife scales at this spot for the last couple of years, I believe. So we're looking to continue to get eyes on this site to see if, we continue to see signs of fish trying to access this culvert. We're hoping to do some restoration work here. And then I'll just highlight a couple remaining spots on the north and south forks that are outside the estuary, but on the east end. One spot is at the Baiting Hollow Boy Scout Camp in Wading River. There's a parking lot at the end of Edwards Avenue here that you can park at, and then you can walk to reach the dam here. And you're going to want to look on the north or downstream side of this dam to see if you see any fish. Byron, yeah.
Yeah, Elizabeth, I don't think you want to park at the end of Edwards Avenue. You want to park on Sound Avenue in that real hollow.
On Sound Avenue, okay.
Yeah, so right there. There's an access road.
Okay.
Right, I can't. Right under the lake, under the red.
There's an access road here.
Yeah, that's the best access. You can comfortably park on the side of Sound Avenue. If the gate is unlocked, there's a gravel parking lot. It's about a 5-minute walk, 10-minute walk down into the pond. Coming from the other side at Edwards Avenue, I think you have to go across private property.
Oh, okay. Okay. Sorry. I may have got that information wrong from Vicky. So I do have a resource packet, just so you guys know, that provides information on all of these sites and maps for these sites. Lauren can stick that in the chat too. For this site, If you want to monitor, we're asking you to contact my colleague, Vicki O'Neill from Long Island Sound Study, so she can actually let the Boy Scout camp know that you would be potentially out here monitoring. And I can double check with her on the parking, but I think go with what Byron said.
Yeah, I've been in there a number of times. Now, I'm not sure how much Boy Scout activities be going on with the COVID, but generally the weekends, if COVID does not impact their activities, it's pretty hectic in there with Boy Scouts. So
Okay.
that's kind of a weekday site visit.
Okay, good to know. And then on the South Shore, we do have a little bit of lack of coverage between the, from Quag over to Moriches. So I just am going to highlight a few streams here that we're looking to get volunteers at in case you live in this area. The first is Tyrell River. And you're going to want to look just downstream of Montauk Highway here, where you see this green to red, the barrier there. Another spot to check is Seatuck Creek. And again, you're going to want to check at the Montauk Highway crossing. The other spot, that's not it, Spionk River. And again, you'll want to check at this crossing right here, south of Montauk Highway. And then Aspetuck River, there's a spot right here off of Brook Road that has easy access that you can check out. And, oh yeah, and this one, Quantock Creek. This is access off of South Country Road up here. You can check out this spot as well. So if you live in...
There's a couple of places there. The South Country Road is a good spot to look. It's pretty open. The other place is to go into the Quag Wildlife Refuge and walk to the spillway.
Okay.
Okay, I have not seen river herring there, though they have been reported on occasion. What you might find there is juvenile eels at the base of that spillway.
All right, great. Thanks, Byron.
I would recommend that anything along the south, on the south side, any of those streams and creeks that come in and butt up against the dam, if you have access to it, it looks like you can get there without getting yourself in trouble or getting hurt, stop and take a look. It doesn't hurt because a lot of those little streams are impounded right at Montauk Highway, and that's where the fish might be if there's anything there.
Yep.
And another spot to look at in Mecox Bay to the east. Keep going.
Mecox.
At Watermill.
Yep.
I know the town of Southampton is very interested in access to Mill Creek. There's a dam right there. I know that alewives make it into Mecox Bay when they open it. I just don't know what they do once they get inside of Mecox. And Mill Creek has been of interest to the trustees in Southampton.
Yes, that's right. Thanks, Byron.
Yeah, Byron, I did find fish remnants in that area last spring, so they were getting into Mecox, but there was no way that they'd be able to get into Mill Creek the way it is right now.
No, and that's a historic dam. I've talked to a couple of people on the trustees about what they might do, and I don't think they're excited about reconstructing that roadway and that dam. Whether there's some small fish passage that could be put through the existing culvert, I don't know. But no, that's exciting. You found evidence. And the baymen have reported that. I've been aware of fish in Mecox for decades.
So those are the spots, you know, that we've kind of, I guess, found that may be good places to check out. Like I said, I do have a whole packet, which you may be able to see now on my screen, that walks you through most of the sites we just highlighted, provides further maps and instructions on how to access these sites, who to contact, etc. And we'll send all this information out in a follow-up email as well, so you guys have all of the resources you need to do the monitoring. I guess at this point, are there further questions about where to monitor, how to monitor, any of that before we wrap up?
No, I guess all the information will be in the package, and then if we have questions, we could probably ask at that point.
Yes, you can reach out to me at any point. And
Okay.
actually, if I did have my contact information. I can pull it up on the screen just so you guys, have it. Please keep in mind when you are out at your sites and choosing a site, safety is very important. So make sure you're being safe all the time when you're out there. If you have any questions or concerns, you can contact me. I also have listed Emily Hall from Seatuck Environmental Association. Up here, our contact information is also on the protocol, so you can check that out as well. And then Pete and Byron are also, great contacts too.
I'd just like to jump in here, and you probably noticed as Elizabeth was talking, the chat box with the links that she was referring to. So you have the survey online link that's in there, the protocol, the monitoring protocol that she mentioned, the river revival map that she had up on the screen. There's a link to that. And then the last link I sent was the monitoring locations, the East End monitoring locations that she pointed out. I also, Elizabeth, do you want me to send over that Google form for them?
Yes, yes, I forgot about that. We do have a Google form link. If you guys are interested, willing, if you could, put your information in this Google form, just your contact information and where you think you might want to monitor. But if you don't know yet, that's okay too. But this just allows me to, make sure you're on my email list. I can send you updates throughout the season, let you know when we're starting to see fish, that kind of thing, and just gives me an idea of where you guys are monitoring around on the eastern end. And if, the other option is to just send me an email, later and say, please make sure I'm on your list and I'm gonna monitor, at these potential sites. So whatever you're most comfortable with doing. But yes, thank you, Lauren, for reminding me.
Sure. Yeah, so all these resources are here in the chat box, but again, to echo Elizabeth, we're going to be sending out an email. So we collected your email addresses through registration for this event. So there'll be a recap email with the recording of this event as well as these resources. So you can access this at a later date as well. I'm actually going to drop in our website, the Peconic Estuary Partnership's general main website, where all of this stuff will also be posted on as well. So does anyone have any other questions for Elizabeth or Byron or Pete? I know it's 5:07, so we're a little bit over time now, but if you have any questions or if there's a particular site that you had a question on, feel free to ask now.
No, thank you.
All good, thanks.
All right, great.
Well, thank you guys. We really appreciate your interest, and we hope that you'll try to get out this season and help us look for fish.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, thank you,
you.
everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Stuff. Ciao. Thanks, Pete.